Shalom and good evening to you on a Wednesday night. That never gets old. Thank you so much to the people who got us a cool theme song. My name is J.W. Colwell. Welcome to Generation Movie. Not Generation X, not Generation Y, not the Boomers. Generation Movie. Everybody growing up in movies and loving movies. I am joined, as always, by the amazing and wonderful FilmBuff Online and Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, right? Circle?
Yes. In fact, we just finished taping 2 episodes of their podcast this evening called The Film Scribes. So you can find that on iTunes and all.
The Film Scribes. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Rich Drees joining us on Wednesday. How are you, my friend? Are your what were you talking about on your other podcast?
We were going over reviews of, a lot of recent releases from Minions to Nope to The Gray Man to Bodies.
I at some point want to have a lengthy discussion about Nope with you. Did you Nope or love Nope or what? I love Nope. I
loved it, but it took me about 6 to 8 hours to get there when I first walked out of it because I was expecting something different than what he gave me, and that's where I had to kind of realize I needed to adjust my expectations.
You have to reprogram yourself.
Yeah.
Because it subverts expectations.
It's something I get upset when I see other people doing it too, judging a movie on, not what it's trying to do, but what they expected or what they wanted. And so I was kind of had that little moment of humility where I was like, oh, wait a second. No, this is
really you have to give it up. You have to give it up to the guy that gets one over on you. Because you and I have seen a lot of movies, and when, we're not going to talk about it, but when the movie hits, the moment it hits, you're like, oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're doing, Jordan Peele. And I think people are a little bit wrong in the sense that where they say it's his third best movie. I think it's better than Us. I know that it's better than Get Out for pure zeitgeist. You know what I mean? Just for pure nailing something and doing amazing at it. Tonight is one of those sets. Tonight is Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It is one of the seminal teen high school movies ever made. Like it's way up on the list of whatever high school movies you come up with, and we're going to talk about it later because I was thinking about this as I was walking through and I was looking at things. Is this, everybody talks about Mount Rushmore and all those different things, right? But this, and you're like, how high is it, with regards to high school movies? And we'll talk to different people about that.
Possibly top 2.
Yeah, it's way high, and there's only you say Mount Rushmore, you get into the whole 4, try to get 4 movies onto the same stratosphere, and I think it's really high. It's an amazing piece of cinema that actually, it's a rare teen movie that actually gets better and stays funny and is cross-generational because there's so many things going on in it.
It's also one of those rare teen comedies from the 80s that you can go back to. and there's not a whole lot of cringe or stuff that just has not aged well.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I understand.
And
yeah,
I have no, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah. There's no, like, it's really funny. There's no, I think part of the charm of the movie is there's no cringe factor because it's like the first time Hollywood made actual real teenagers and actually like treated them as such, as opposed to just functioning robots in a movie to sell tickets, right? I think part of the amazing enduring charm of it is that it's they're real situations, real kids.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very much real kids. And we'll get to that in a moment. But I would say, too, that this is one of the very few teen sex comedies that treats its women characters, its female characters, as actual real characters with agency and who are allowed to make mistakes and become better and grow. And that's I'm going to give half credit.
They're not just the object.
Yeah. I'm going to give half credit to Cameron Crowe, who wrote the original book that the movie was based on, and who wrote the screenplay as well. And also Amy Heckerling, who, as a this is her debut as a feature film director. She had one short film that she did in college under her belt when she got this gig. But that short film, which unfortunately I've not seen, I've only read about, was about a teenage girl wanting to lose her virginity. I believe it was called something like Let's Just Get It Over With. And
that's perfect.
I really want to see this because I think that really feeds into a lot of what is happening in this movie, especially with the character Stacy and such. So
okay, so that's a good point. We'll get to that. We got some other stuff coming up. Let's have some friends joining us. Ken McKernan, good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us again this week.
Evening,
Brandon Brooks. Hi, what up, JW and Rich? Talking some Spicoli tonight. The beginning of the man, the myth, the legend that became Sean Penn, and of course that rising out of the pool scene that made Phoebe Cates an icon. Yeah, I mean that's. I think there was a Collider. I want to say Collider or Esquire or some sort of thing where that's the most heavily rewound bit of videotape in the history of the world.
Which is funny because if you're a guy and you're rewinding it for the reason most guys probably were rewinding that scene over and over again, you are the object of the joke of that scene.
Yeah, well,
basically.
I had another epiphany. We're gonna get to epiphanies later as well, and about like the man, the myth, the legend, Sean Penn. A lot of the and we're gonna get to it. The legacy of the film is also in its casting, and in its what it did with everything, and the director and writer of the movie. That again, it's an elite kind of Hollywood farm. This movie is like it's like growing potatoes in Idaho the right way, I guess. And then Ken brought up cringe factor, Last American Virgin, also 1982. There is a heavy cringe factor in that movie, though. That movie's a little bit, that gets a little, but it's good. I'm not going to say it's not good.
Yeah, that's another film I think kind of treats its female characters somewhat respectfully. Last American Virgin came out in September. This came out at the beginning of August. Last American Virgin was like second week of September, I want to say.
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
And then
that's also a great movie, great soundtrack. We may cover it. We may or may not what we do. But that's another great movie that does that. It's like the movie that nobody talks about from the 80s. But if you've seen it, you go, it's the first thing that comes in your mind. Like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, it's the first thing. If other thing comes in your mind, one of the things is Last American Virgin. If you've seen it, it's kind of like it's in a rock quarry somewhere where you have to find it. You have to dig for it. You have to really dig for it. I think it was on Vestron Video when it was in the 90s when it came out on VHS. But okay,
I would be surprised if somebody like Shout Factory had a copy of it out at some point.
That would be appropriate. That would be
feels
right
like a
on
Shout Factory kind of a release.
Yeah, that would be on brand, right? Okay, so first, before we get started, let's get into the meat and potatoes. If you like this content, please subscribe to our Indie Escape Network YouTube channel, www.youtube.com, Indie Escape Network. We have a lot of good people. Brandon is one of them. Gabe had an incredible show last night with Darren Lynn Boozman. Brandon had Amanda Burse from Fright Night, and we're Married with Children, and director of many things last week. It was a pleasure for me to go on his show and ask her a question. So I got to talk to Amy. Haha, you didn't. But you have the Fast Times at Ridgemont High book that nobody can get. You're gonna hold it up in a second because you're also showing off. So with showing off, Rich put up an Amy Heckerling picture earlier with her, and he also put up that he has the original Fast Times at Ridgemont High book without a print, and you can't really get. Indie Escape Network also on Facebook, I should say.
Facebook, Twitter,
we're everywhere.
Insta.
Yeah, we're on fire. The network's on fire. It's growing leaps and bounds. Cool people coming in. We have all kinds of good things going on. But let's get. And this is an interesting case. So again, we're running into an area where there isn't a lot of trouble, right?
No.
The production stuff is all about the pieces it acquired and the pieces that didn't sign on, right?
Yeah.
Like we.
Can we start by taking a step back? I want to talk about Cameron Crowe because this guy's early life is amazing. Living in California, precociously smart kid, was writing for local music magazines when he was like 14 years old, when he started his professional career as a writer. And by the time he was 16, the stuff he was turning out was so good that Ben Fong-Tors, the publisher or the editor-in-chief at Rolling Stone, reached out to him and said, hey, we'd like you to come and work for us as a correspondent. And the story goes that when Cameron Crowe showed up at the office, fresh-faced kid of 16, no one believed that he was the guy who was writing this stuff. And if all of this starts to sound familiar, Cameron Crowe, of course, turned the story of his own early days as a rock journalist into the movie Almost Famous.
Which is incredible and one of the best movies.
Which is another fantastic movie. Again, also very well observed about his characters. But so he was writing for Rolling Stone for about 6 years. When he was 22, he hit upon the idea of kind of embedding himself, and we didn't have the term embedding at the time, embedding himself into a local high school and just kind of like hanging out with these kids, taking tests, doing all the student stuff as well, but kind of getting to know these kids. And the idea was to write an article about what the kids are doing. He had said all the time that at Rolling Stone, they were always writing pieces about, what the kids are up to, being, the generation of teenagers at that time. And he thought this was probably the best way to do that type of article. And so with the knowledge of the principal of the school, and, he was still living at home with his parents at the time, so he could do this and have cover with his parents. He embedded himself into a school, which gets renamed Ridgemont High for the book. And he stayed with them for a year. And then when he came out, he had enough material that he wrote a book instead of just doing an article. The book, there was a buzz about the book all through 1980 or so when it was being readied for publication, that the studio came to him and bought the film rights to the book while it was still in galleys. The book hadn't even been published yet.
I know you have a copy of this, but have you looked online with how much this book is worth?
I'm afraid because
I looked it up after you showed it off earlier today, and do you want to know or no?
Yeah, tell me.
The used one at Etsy for $2,500. Abe Books for $750. Abe Books for $1250.
What's the cover condition? Because honestly, if you look, this one's a little ratty up here in the corner.
Well, I don't think it's a $2,500 one, but it might be. There's other ones for $472, $490, $469.
Wow. You want to know how much I paid for this?
Can
you see that?
$7?
$7.50.
That's a beautiful purchase, my friend, because you might be able to put somebody through college with that.
Used bookstore in Flagstaff, Arizona. when I was out there for my friend Damon's wedding, his first of many. He would laugh at that joke.
He would definitely would.
And,
I think that's the place it starts, right? I mean, it starts with the book.
Yeah, and Cameron Crowe writes the book. Studio's looking around. They find Amy Heckerling just out of film school, and it's a match made in heaven, really. And if people are looking for the book, by the way, and you want to read it, just put into Google Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a true story by Cameron Crowe, PDF. And you can find a couple places that have it available as a PDF file to read.
Oh, that's nice.
Can download it, put it on your iPad, your whatever, what have you, and you can still read the book. And it's a great read. It's a fantastic read. And you'll be surprised by how faithful the movie is to the book. I mean,
I think that's one of the things that make it so interesting, right? He embeds himself in this high school. It's in San Diego. He comes out of whatever. And then they buy it immediately. And the next thing that starts happening is Heckerling gets on board from film school, right? She comes over, and then they start casting. And the casting stuff it's the stuff of legends. It's one of those movies, even the background dudes are, become major stars. And some of them don't even have lines, for God's sake. My favorite is Anthony Edwards, who's just popping around in the movie, right? Goes on to ER and do a bunch of different things. Gotcha, which is an 80s fave for me. You ever seen Gotcha? Gotcha's a great movie. There's a bunch of assassination movies in the 80s, but fake assassination movies. But basically the cast, right? You're looking at Sean Penn gets cast as Jeff Spicoli. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who goes on to be an Oscar-nominated actress. Stacy, Judge Reinhold, Phoebe Cates, of course. Ray Walston, who was my favorite Martian, and this is a totally different role for him. And he just about. I know everybody gets ramped up on Spicoli, but Mr. Hand steals the movie too. That relationship, aside from all the kid stuff that's going on, the relationship of the delinquent student and somebody who's just as big as equal and can throw down with him is almost important. There's two separate parallel functions in the movie, and there too is one of the absolute best things about the movie. Rewatching it today, you watch those scenes, and those scenes crackle. Him and Ray Walston are they're not at each other's throats or anything, but it's this comedically one-upsmanship. The pizza gets ordered, isn't it our time? It just fighting back and all kinds of stuff. But he gets cast.
And it's totally paid off in the end when Mr. Hand comes to Spicoli's house at the end. And that's a moment where you realize he's not doing it just to be a dick to Spicoli.
He's doing it because he actually cares about the kids. There's a whole thing he talks about truancy.
That it's very subtle. It's a great performance.
There's the thing about truancy too.
One thing to remember Ray Walston by, it would be that. Just that moment is fantastic.
Well, but there's a truancy line early in the movie where he's talking, and it's the first time all the kids are in the class, and Spicoli's late, and he's talking about truancy, and he's like, there are teachers in this school that turn a blind eye to truancy. You show up late, they act like you don't notice. You show up late, you don't care. And who does it pay off for? Not them. So it's he's attacking other teachers too. It's amazing. And then Forest Whitaker is one of the last. Oh, actually, Forest Whitaker, Eric Stotlz, and Nicholas Cage. And here's the epiphany I had today, because we're going to talk about casting and production. So Eric Stotlz is kind of Spicoli's drug dealer, right? Could this character be the same character in Pulp Fiction? And that's an epiphany I had today, just because there's a moment where Spicoli's on the line with him, and he's like, "What did you give me?" And he's like, "It's good shit. It's good shit." And I'll pick you up in the van. We'll go to the school. But I'm putting Eric Stoltz and that together immediately, sort of maybe that's where Tarantino got the idea for Pulp Fiction. I mean, making him the drug dealer. on the Mia Wallace date.
The character doesn't have a given name in this movie. He's just called Stoner Bud. So
I'm just saying. And Nick Cage. Nick Cage is in the movie.
I'm all for the Pulp Fiction Ridgemont High.
Yeah, the multiverse. Yes, absolutely. But I was thinking about it today. It's an epiphany. It's an epiphany you only have when you watch these classic movies where things kind of all tie together, and maybe a director sees an actor doing something and they cast them later on in life, and it's something where like I don't even know that Tarantino knows for sure. Like it could just be a subtextual thing in his head, seeing so many movies that he's like, you'd be a perfect drug dealer. Okay, we have some comments before we get too far going. Let's see what we got.
Marty McFly.
No. Well, and interesting you mentioned that. So I had our original copy, long lost, probably toilet paper.
Dude.
Only if you're the president. Okay. Ex-president, I should say. Also, Nick Cage and Eric Stoltz. Yes. And then here's like when you're looking through stuff and you find that these are the people that turn down roles, and this could have been an even bigger kind of like, although everybody's perfectly cast, right? But so people that you find that when you look up, you go, they almost had this person, Jodie Foster as Stacy, Matthew Broderick as Spicoli.
No, thank you.
No. It wouldn't have worked. Justin Bateman as Linda. That's an interesting one. And Tom Hanks was up for the role of Brad. So it's kind of this weird, like I think another thing we're going to talk about legacy, but and I'm wearing my Ferris shirt tonight. The idea that Matthew Broderick was supposed to play Spicoli, and then later on in life becomes Ferris Bueller, the ultimate high school cad, right? I mean, it's an amazing kind of like, it's a weird kind of semblance, and that only happens in the 80s high school comedies. This weird thing where everybody's kind of like in this same shared universe where we've all seen the movie so many times, we watch them and whatever. Production goes well, and the main concept of the production that gets crazy is the soundtrack. I'm not a music guy, but the Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack is one of the greatest things ever. Like it's a top 5 soundtrack just from the sheer volume of talent on the soundtrack, and also depending on which version of the movie you see, you may not get all that talent because there's so many versions kicking around with altered songs, different music, all these things going on. And so they put out a soundtrack album and some of the songs aren't even in the goddamn movie because of rights battles, right?
Unfortunately.
So you got the songs that aren't included in the original soundtrack that are in the movie is Moving in Stereo by the Cars, American Girl, which is it's a really good song, and it was also used in Silence of the Lambs, so it's easily one of the most iconic film songs, right? It describes a great many things. We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's, Led Zeppelin's Kashmir, Jingle Bell Rock, Eagles' Life in the Fast Lane, and Sam the Sham's Wooly Bully are all not included on the soundtrack, but the soundtrack is huge, Rich. It's got, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't entirely smooth sailing. I mean, the production itself went fairly well. But Heckerling ran into some trouble with the MPAA when it came for the rating. They thought, that girls talking about sexual experiences was a little too frank for them. The studio wanted, kept pushing her to add some more, female nudity because Porky's had just come out while they were shooting. So the studio was thinking boobies equal bucks. And
it did.
So she was kind of pushing back on that. There's this one scene where we're in the boathouse or in the pool house.
Stacy
and Damone are about to have sex. She originally shot that where we see Damone full frontal. And the MPA was like, no, we can't do that. And
the penis was offensive.
Yes.
The female sex organ is aggressive, and all this. Can you imagine the MPA?
She had a choice to make. Either she gets to keep that scene, or she gets to keep the carrot blowjob scene from earlier. And I think she kept the wisely, kept that because that's more important to the story.
Right, and the interesting thing is, Criterion just released a disc. We're going to talk later, but Criterion just released a disc in 2021. It made the Criterion Collection, and they restored it. They restored the full penis scene because 2022 is a different time for the NBA. There is dick everywhere right now, so you could go watch a movie and not expect it, and then boom, it's there. But yeah, there was a lot of fighting about that.
Yeah, a lot of fighting about the peen. Westworld. I've seen a lot of peen right now too. Yeah. So.
Well, it's aggressive. It's in a lot of stuff you're not expecting it, and just kind of, it's there, and then you're like, okay.
Pixar movie, that was a surprise.
It was weird. It was weird when it showed it, but I am Groot today. But I was shocked. I was a little shocked. But no, it's one of the. Yeah, she fights with the MPA. The MPA says weird shit to her. The male member is aggressive and not aesthetically pleasing, and all this other stuff.
It's always been weird about sex and nudity, and there have been double standards. And God, even though the movie's like 12 or 13, maybe 15 years old now, Kirby Dick, the documentarian, did a great movie called "This Film Is Not Yet Rated." And it really explores the bullshit double standards that the MPA
the 10 people that are deciding who can see movies.
Yeah,
and they love violence and they hate sex. They love violence. Violence is way cool. Okay, so
and if you're a major studio, you get a lighter rating than if you're a independent studio.
And all she really did to change the scene was just had to move ever so slightly. Because they're both on display. They both kind of strip at the same time. So he kind of shifts a little bit. So
it's an
behind the camera
where, symbolism's kind of obvious, but they're both becoming vulnerable to each other and they're unsure about it. And I think it's a very interesting moment in the film. And then,
it's interesting that we talk about Phoebe Cates and that sequence exists. And I think Jennifer Jason Leigh is much cuter in this movie than Phoebe Cates, but I'm not gonna deny Phoebe Cates. So young Forest Whitaker is what we said that, yeah. You got an Oscar winner that's playing football in this movie. You also have funny fact. I heard producer wanted David Lynch to direct initially. That's an interesting one. That could have been like.
I want to see that movie just out of morbid curiosity.
Mulholland High. Fast Times at Mulholland High.
It's like this horse walking through the background for no reason in the school hall, and then ultimately we got David Lynch directing Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Twin Peaks. That's his high school movie.
It's as close as we're gonna get. But I think the interesting thing when you're looking at these movies, main things come down to for the teen movies in the 80s, because we've been dealing with a lot of very super serious big motion pictures, but with the teen movies, the casting is almost as important as anything, right? I mean, and they knocked it out of the park. Like Penn is in rare form. And Phoebe Cates
is so good that it bums me out that outside of that remake of We're No Angels, he never did another comedy. He
stayed away from it. He got super serious, and then made
it kind of bums me out.
Oscar bait like I Am Sam, just absolutely terrible Oscar bait that I Am Sam is. But it is and that's the thing. But Heckerling brings everything together. The script is tight though. Like if you rewatch the movie, he has parallel lines of storylines that are going, and they don't have to intersect for everything to get an idea that this is what's going on in this functional American high school, right?
Yeah,
and it's kind of beautiful, and it's a short movie. Like it doesn't take forever to tell its stories. It also has Crowe puts at the end basically all of the things that they're doing, a la Animal House, and things where everybody what they're going to do after the movie, and just based on their characters and based on who they are, which everybody always gets a kick out of. The jump forward. Oh, Stacey and Ryder together and they still haven't gone all the way. Oh, oh, Damone got busted for selling Ozzy Osbourne tickets. He's working 7-Eleven. Like important stuff. Spicoli blew his, money after he saved Brooke Shields on a Van Halen birthday party concert. Like good stuff. They're funny and it works. The cast is amazing. Everything goes well. It's made production budget is $4.5 million, which is, I don't know that you could pay anybody in this that's starring in the movie less than $4.5 million right now. Like if you're looking at everybody that was in this movie, like I don't even know that Eric Stoltz would be less than $4.5 million. I feel like there are people that haven't been working that would still get $4.5 million, but that's the entire budget, and everything looks good. And we were talking about this today. I'm going to let you take it because you were like, do you remember when there was a thing we called?
Oh, this movie is so timeless in how it treats its characters because these are the same kind of issues every generation deals with in terms of figuring out sex, figuring out the responsibilities of sex, figuring out relationships and friendships and going through schools. But it is so rooted in like 1982 because so much of it is centered around the mall and mall culture. And we don't have shopping malls and shopping mall anymore.
What's a mall? I'm sorry. No, I know what a mall is.
Yeah,
no, but
exactly.
So I was thinking about it as I'm watching the movie. And I immediately texted back to you. Yeah, you said, do you remember, in the rewatch, do you remember when there was time there was malls? Yes. And I said, do you remember a time when there were theaters less than 10 screens?
Yep.
And then
the movie theater in the movie is 4 screens.
It was huge. And that
seems like craziness.
Nuts. 2 different entrances and 2 different levels in the mall. What? Also, like I was thinking about other things. Like there's a moment where the biology professor walks in, played by the amazing character actor Victor Chevalier, who's also very big in Ghost. Chevalier.
Yeah.
And
also in Buckaroo Banzai.
Which
is celebrating its release
day. I know. I got you. I know.
Had to work that
point. I know you did. I know. It was the first thing on your mind this morning. But he has a great moment where he walks in and first day of school, he's like, "Oh, I'm going a little slow today. I'm now drinking Sanka." Sanka doesn't exist, folks. It doesn't exist. It was a decaffeinated coffee.
There's a reference to photomats. Whoever's been born after like 1993 has never heard of what a photomat is.
Yeah, and there's
FOTOMAT. Go look it up, kids. Ask your grandparents.
Ask somebody. But $4.5 million is not a lot of money, and they actually there's a lot. It looks good on the screen. It's amazingly well done, and it is finally released. It is released on August 13th. So we're actually very close.
Yeah,
to the date. Off. We're a couple of days off. But we're only trying to get a little bit ahead, so we're trying to figure things out. It's released on August 13th. It doesn't do exceptionally well, but they did it in like a more of a tiered release system. So it was 498 theaters opening weekend, which again is a little bit different, way different from today's release structure, but also different from the summer of '82 structure where you had a couple movies, 2 or 3 or 4 movies getting released on like 1,000 screens. So it's half the number of screens. It grosses $2.5 million its opening weekend. Following week it does well, and they bring it up to 713 theaters, and it grosses 3.25 million the following week. So it goes up with the number of screens going up. Ends up earning 27 million and becomes the 29th ranked film released in the United States in 1982. But the key here is, Rich, $27 million on a $4 million budget is a 6 multiple. It's 6 times the budget, which means it's a money maker. And we haven't even gotten to ancillary sales. We haven't even gotten to the fact that this movie, when you get to video cassette and when you get to VHS, it completely takes off. and becomes a movie that everybody, some people own. Everybody has rented it at least once. And again, it leads to that Collider article where we're talking about the single most rewinded moment in VHS history, with Phoebe Cates and Brad Hamilton and Linda with their cosmic meeting in Brad's mind. And I think the interesting thing about the box office is it does well at the box office, even though there are serious portions of the film. It does well at the box office, even though it's not necessarily a laugh out loud riot that you see in the 80s, right? It's not gross out humor and all these things that you see. It's got its heart on its sleeve. And I think people, you fall in love with the characters.
Nothing's really exaggerated in this movie. You know, most movie comedies, you know, there's some moment of unrealistic exaggeration, but usually when that hits, you're already enveloped in the world of the movie, so it's okay.
Yeah, and
the only say Real Genius at the end where they, you know, fill the house with popcorn, the lasers hit it, and they jiffy pop the roof off. You know, that's ridiculous. I would love to see that actually happen in real life, and you know, that was a practical effect.
There are some people I would like to see that happen.
Stuff. But
well, no, I think the most ridiculous character in the movie is Spicoli, and even he's written with a subtle hand to not only be right. Maybe it was intended. I don't know. Maybe I'm just brilliant. Anyway, but yeah, I think the thing that makes it a box office hit, the thing that makes it people going back on video, and people like us revering it, is because nobody's a super clown. There aren't like you were talking about Porky's earlier. There's no Pee-wee in this movie where the butt of every joke. Even the guy that's the biggest nerd in the movie ends up being pretty damn cool in the sense that he hears his friend did a bad thing to the girl he likes, and he, you know, stands up for her and kind of like, what did you do, asshole? I stand up for. I speak for you. They talk about you all the time about what an asshole you are. And I say, no, not him. You just don't know him. And maybe they were right, you know, and it's just a great moment. Like the nerd gets his moment. And Jennifer Jason Leigh is fantastic in the movie. She's confused. She at times is a smoldering sex pot in the movie. She's confused. And then she's a sex pot again. Like she doesn't, you know, she acts the role perfectly. And when I heard her, yeah, well, but Jennifer Jason Leigh is a special kind of like, she's an actress that I think is an acquired taste and has been in very specific movies. And if you've seen them, you become a fan of hers, right? Single white female, you know, like, but she's super talented, and she's just one of those things where her innocence kind of like is like written all over her face throughout the entire movie. And the mall life subculture is also amazing. I got a comment. Ken, Jennifer Jason Leigh's father, Vic Morrow, died 20 years earlier to Fast Times at the set of Twilight Zone movie. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate this. The Twilight Zone murder is actually one of the quintessential weird moments of the 80s that you can't really explain. It's one of those time moments where you're just like, and my dad was one of those. He was a big Vic Morrow fan, and he's like, "What happened?" Huh?
And to tangent on this for a moment, and then we'll head right back into Fast Times. As a fan of John Landis's early work, at least, and knowing how grossly irresponsible he was on Twilight Zone, it's hard for me to reconcile those two sides, unfortunately. And it does kind of tinge. Yes, I've met Landis a couple of times. I probably have a picture of me and him on Facebook. But yeah, sometimes it's just like when I think about that shit, I'm like, it's
certainly altered the scope of his career.
Yeah,
it certainly altered the scope of his career, and
yes,
what he eventually had to do to try to get over and do other things. You know what I mean? Like it completely altered his career. And I got to imagine that Jennifer Jason Leigh was affected by it, but not necessarily during this movie because it was made a little bit earlier. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're talking about how this was received and how VHS at home video kind of helped its reputation. I realized that we've done what 9 episodes, 10 episodes, 9 films from 1982, the summer of 1982, eight or 9.
A glorious summer of 82.
Yeah, this is the 3rd film from the summer of 1982 that we've talked about that has been elected into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry.
Yeah, it's
alongside Blade Runner and E.T.
Yeah,
so,
we're gonna jump to critical response because that's a perfect segue. The idea that you look at that and you go, oh my god, this is one of the national film. 2005 is the year it went in, and it is one of those things where when you're hanging out with E.T. and Blade Runner as the most quintessential or seminal of movies, right? Not necessarily the biggest hit, but the movie that stands the test of time. I would argue that if you can watch this movie now and still, or a teenager could watch it now and still get like, there's moments of pure pleasure out of the movie. Like Spicoli is a one of a kind movie phenomenon. And you're right, Sean Penn not doing more comedies or not doing realizing getting so far away from this character, becoming like the bad boy Sean Penn from the 80s and 90s, and like too gruff, and now like he's gotten older and he's much more politically active, and he never got back to it. He never got back and did a comedy, which it's one of those actors where you wish maybe somebody would have taken him aside and said, you don't have to be goddamn serious all the time. You can do something fun. Like, you look at the actors today, like Leo does a fun movie for every Revenant where he's fighting a bear and going through hell in the wilderness. He makes a Django where it's for him. Penn never did that. Penn never hit that button. You know what I mean? Critical response is okay. It's the funny thing about it is critical response is mixed. I mean, for a movie of this year that we're talking about, 78% on Rotten Tomatoes as we speak. Metacritic is 61 out of 100.
And yet, Roger Ebert gave this 1 star.
Roger Ebert's direct quote is, "It's a scuzz pit of a movie."
Well, actually, I have his whole review right here.
Oh, is scuzz pit of a movie part of the yellow part that you've?
Yes, it's
awesome.
No. That's something separate. I want to get to that in a minute. But the scuzz pit thing comes in his lead. This is literally how this review starts off. How could they do this to Jennifer Jason Leigh? How could they put such a fresh and cheerful person into such a scuzz pit of a movie? Don't they know that they have a star on their hands? I don't even know who Leigh was when I walked in. I didn't even know who Leigh was when I walked into Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and yet I was completely won over by her. She contained so much life and light that she was a joy to behold. And then she and everybody else in this so-called comedy is invited to plunge into offensive vulgarity. Now, this is the guy who wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And I know that's a cheap way of undermining what he says here.
It is. I agree. It is a cheap way to do it.
I would love to know
the Valley of the Dolls.
He went back and reevaluated his stance on this. I mean, he's right in recognizing Jennifer Jason Leigh as an incredible. A light, a life and light that is a joy to behold.
That is true. That's absolutely true. Everything about that.
He can spot somebody's great potential, but that he was turned off by the raunchiness of this instead of recognizing that it was kind of like frank discussions that teenagers have.
Yeah, I don't think it's raunchy. Like
that he missed this movie so much, like he did.
Well, and he has a few where he's missed, a few that he really missed on. Yeah. But this one is an interesting one because, like, some of the harder critics, right? Ebert, widely regarded as somebody that if you gave him a good time at the movies and you made a good movie, he would find a way to embrace it, even if it wasn't perfect. But like Janet Maslin, who is like, again, I can't describe what a jerk Janet Maslin could be. Like, she's one of the biggest, harshest critics of Star Wars in the history of history. And she wrote, like, one of the quotes that she has, a jumbled but appealing teenage comedy and something of a fresh perspective on the subject.
Yeah.
So she got it. She got it perfectly.
She was like, all these young actors are relaxed, funny, and natural, but the movie's real scene stealer is Sean Penn, as a pink-eyed surfer named Jeff Spicoli who wouldn't dream of holding down a job. I mean, so she's recognizing Penn as, the critics were recognizing that there are great actors in here.
I think that's one of the things about the movie that's interesting when you critique it now. If you and I are talking about it, I can see where you can get into a rut and not see the beauty in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the kid, and you and I have seen so many teenage comedies in our lifetime. The idea that the kids are treated with reverence and respect, and they hit almost every beat for almost every kid in the movie is almost letter perfect of somebody that you might have known in high school. You know what I mean? The Pat Benatar thing, the carrot blowjob sequence is amazing. Like they hit upon, there's vulgarity in it, but it's not anything that none of us would have heard if you grew up in the 90s or grew up in the 80s at a cafeteria. There's nothing in it that you haven't heard that's so vulgar that you go, oh my God. I think we got a couple comments. Hold on.
Yeah, Let's see. Amy Heckerling
Joe,
is...
Why do you say you suck, Joe? Sorry, guys. And he goes, I got my days mixed up. That's okay, Joe. You can miss some days. You're on the network almost every night, holding the banner for everybody. So you can take some time off and relax.
I think part of the reverence for these characters comes from the fact that this wasn't just a book that Cameron Crowe wrote. These aren't characters he created. This is reportage. He hung out with these kids for a year. He grew to know them. He grew to like them. Maybe not like some of them, but he was true to his journalistic impulses and wrote about them truthfully and honestly, because that's what his mission was when he went in to do this. And Amy Heckerling's like 26, 27 when she directs this. So, she's not that far removed from that experience either. And so she obviously felt a kinship to these kids and felt an almost an obligation to make sure that their stories were truthful, especially in the face of, studio pressure on her.
More nudity, more female nudity, please. Yeah, just crazy. I think there was also a nice little snippet of a review from Dana Stevens, who basically wrote an essay for the Criterion Collection when they endorsed it and brought it out. Again, this is a Criterion Collection film that's usually reserved for, very artsy films. Fast Times is the polar opposite of exploitation. Deep in its horny heart, this is a story of one 15-year-old girl's clumsy and sometimes painful introduction to the world of sex, related without judgment or preconception or the least hint of sentimentalization. Heckerling's film is a raunchy crowd pleaser replete with stoner humor, masturbation gag, and a blowjob tutorial that makes use of school cafeteria carrots. But it is also attuned to the emotional lives of teenagers, girls, and boys in ways that place it far ahead of its time. And that's the key. The key is there are many ways to watch this movie. There are many characters to watch in it. And each one is somebody you may have known or may have met. And each one of them is a breathing, living human being in the film. And so I think it's an interesting thing where we're looking at it as it gets, drawn into the Criterion Collection, as it gets taken to this height, right? The accolades, 40 years in the making, these accolades, right? Basically just through sheer will.
I want to stick with the critics here for a second before we move on.
Sure.
I want to circle back to both Maslin and Ebert. Maslin had a point I kind of agree with her on, though. That and you kind of approached it too when you're talking about how there's so many different characters and their stories don't necessarily all intersect and complement each other. And for Maslin, that was kind of a negative. She, because there was no central character walking through the reporter, if you will. There was no Cameron Crowe character walking through and connecting everything. And I can see where that could be an issue for some people. Because I know I highlighted it like right at the end of her review. I
I think it's funny that those are the two both reviews you and I looked at, because she was one of the toughest critics, Rich. She was an absolute beast.
Mm-hmm. She says there's a lot to make her likable, but not much to hold the film together. And the other thing, because I cannot understand Ebert's missing the boat on this. But the thing that I did have highlighted here that you pointed out. Okay, quote, I went to a sneak preview thrown by a rock radio station, and the audience had come for a good time. But during a scene involving some extremely frank talk about certain popular methods of sexual behavior, even the rock fans were grossed out. There's a difference between raunchiness and gynecological detail. He has to be talking about the carrot blowjob scene, right?
Yeah.
Which is mild. Maybe well, it's mild. I think it's kind of a mild discussion.
I think
maybe the joke she makes about when a guy climaxes. Oh, it's like a quart.
Yeah, but even that's not. Maybe he's talking that he felt exploited, because the part that sequence ends. It starts with a frank discussion. It has a joke in the middle, and then it ends with the guys at the table next to them, all clapping.
He's saying that even the rock fans were grossed out.
I can't believe that. I can't believe. I feel that's hyperbole.
Yeah, I would like to know if
kind of hyperbole you and I share for Marvel films.
I would like to know if it was like more male or more female rock fans. I would like to know what the makeup is, the gender makeup on that.
I can't imagine I can't imagine male rock fans being upset about it.
I know exactly. I can't imagine female rock fans being upset about it, because they're probably like, I've had that conversation with my friend Connie or whoever.
Yeah,
that's a weird
thing.
I mean, I revere
very specific
work, but I can't believe we're spending this much time
But that's a very specific. That's a very specific thing. Very specific. So the concept now also other accolades. Again, National Film Registry is a big deal. It made the American Film Institute 100 Years, 100 Laughs, 87. It is number 2 on Entertainment Weekly's list of 50 best high school movies. So you said 2, which is interesting. So it's revered now, and it should be
number 1.
I do. Hold on. I did not look. I'm gonna guess. That number 1 is The Breakfast Club, but that's just me being. Hold on. Entertainment Weekly top 50 high school movies. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, it's Breakfast Club.
Yeah, there we go. So what's third? What's the
third is Dazed and Confused.
Well, okay.
Fourth is Rebel Without a Cause, and fifth is Heathers.
So yeah, that's a good list, actually. That's a really good list. So we know the critical response now is that it's a seminal classic, that we can't get enough of it, right?
Yeah.
So I beg to ask you, Rich, and this is what I was hoping we would talk about. Do you have a Mount Rushmore? Do you have the high? We just did Entertainment Weeklies. I was going to say, and I didn't look at that list. I just looked where this fell on it. This and Breakfast Club are definitely on that list for me, right? And I think Dazed and Confused is also on that list. So that's actually a great list from Entertainment Weekly. Rebel Without a Cause could be on that list. I don't know that would be my personal 4.
It doesn't feel so much about a high school movie as Rebel Without a Cause feels like a teenager movie, which is 2 different things.
Yeah, I think Heathers might be my personal choice. Like if you did Breakfast, like maybe 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, because John Hughes has to be represented in this high school movies equation, right? But Breakfast Club 1, Fast Times 2. Not actually, you don't even give numbers. Fast Times, Breakfast Club, Dazed and Confused because it feels authentic. Dazed and Confused, when you talk about legacy, I think Dazed and Confused is the grandkid or the child of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Because I think when you look at Dazed and Confused, the seminal moment, they pick one day in a high school and a town, and they focus on all those characters, and it is as authentic as anything we're ever going to see, right, about the specific Texas town from the paddle, So I think the Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Dazed and Confused have a lot in common. Breakfast Club is an easy choice, but I was always partial to Heather's.
At the same time, we're looking at John Hughes' stuff a little bit more critically now, in terms of some of the things that he did.
Definitely has it. 16 Candles has a whole kind of rapey vibe going on.
Well, this is what I was going to
bad stuff in 16 Candles.
And there's some the makeover stuff in Breakfast Club. A lot of people are like, I don't like that. And the fact when Judd is under the desk with Molly Ringwald too.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, well, I can see that. Yeah.
But
fair.
This leads me to a question that I had.
Go ahead.
With so many 80s films that we look back on, teenage films especially, and we see those problematic elements, like in 16 Candles, like basically the rape in Revenge of the Nerds. Say Anything can be kind of looked at as like a creepy stalker dude. Do you see anything now that is of its time that we would probably not be really cool with in Fast Times at Ridgemont High? I mean, there's one thing I can think of, but
I think the maybe the guy not realizing she's 15.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's about it. But that was the 80s in a sense that, that started the whole trend in the 80s and 90s where you were asking how jailbait and the whole, what I mean? Like trying to, like, how old are you? Yeah. And so I don't know that I necessarily view that as, because he doesn't know. Like, if he knows she's 15, then problems, right? But she doesn't tell him, and she tells him she's 19. Yeah. I know there are cuts of the film that contain a sequence where he finds out and he freaks out on her. Like, how could you do that to somebody? I could have gotten in a lot of trouble and all this other stuff. That would be the only sequence.
It's a difficult thing, I think, maybe for some modern audiences.
It could be. Trying to think of other portions of the movie where you might have a quasi a problem.
But everything else I really don't think is, I don't want to say problematic again, but
there's a wholesomeness to it, actually.
Yeah. Again, speaks to its timelessness while still being very rooted in a specific time period.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about it is it is a movie you can show to somebody now, and there are things. I will give you an example of something that that I kind of like watched as I watched today. Is Brad Hamilton not a poster child for the resignation age? If we were to like look at it and go, you want to watch somebody that's he loves his job, he loves going to work, he loves paying for his car, he loves doing everything, and he has one bad day at work with one terrible human being, an awful customer, and I feel it really directly translates. I think it's his dream is to be the guy in the business suit, right? His dream is to be that guy. And I think the way he gets ground up by the businesses in this movie, there is definitely something to be had there where you look at it and you go, chef's kiss, where you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because again, there are pieces of this movie that you watch and you go, it's not necessarily the main character you're focusing on, but the Brad thing hit me today because I kept on thinking of being the poster child for the Great Resignation. I'm not being paid enough to be treated by this guy to call me a moron. And if he does threaten me again, I am gonna kick his ass. Like, and you know what? He ate half the food. He's not right. The customer isn't always right. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's one of the things I touched upon today. Also, just the idea that Hand, while he's viewed in as like the kind of like the cliched tough teacher, in reality, the stuff he's saying to the kids is like, you're not going to eat on my time. We're going to do all this stuff. I'm doing it for you, right? A teacher any of us would have killed to have. You know what I mean? Like, and I find that I find that endearing too. He's not Mr. Chips, but he's not a nice teacher. He's not Dangerous Minds or Mr. Clark from Stand and Deliver, and he's got a lookout for the people that are going through his school. And
no one's standing on a desk saying, "Captain, oh my captain," for this guy.
No, they're saying stay away from his end of the floor. Don't go near that side of the floor. He might get you between bells. You know what I mean? Like he's the boogeyman in that school. But the fun thing about it is when you're older and you're listening, like when you see it, you're like, oh my God, that guy's a prick. But when you're older and you you remember some of your teachers, and it made me think about teachers I had in my high school in North Pocono that were super tough and people avoided like the plague. But I thought they were great. I thought they were like, I had one teacher that was a history professor that he was so tense, and I was in an advanced history class, and he was like, the first day of class, he walked around the class going, so this is my advanced section. Tell me what advanced means. What does that mean? And it's like, holy shit, he's calling us out on day one. And that's what I thought about today. I thought about the idea that Mr. Hand he's viewed as comic cliche in the movie, but he kind of like, he really cares. He wants Spicoli to understand the material. And the Brad epiphany today was absolutely amazing. The idea that he could be like, he's this guy that gets crushed by 3 different jobs in the course of an hour-and-a-half movie. He could literally grow up to be like, you know, if this movie's made today, you know, a shooter or like somebody that has a Columbine moment, or it's that crushing for him.
He grows up and it's falling down.
Exactly.
There's a cinematic universe.
The breakfast isn't done right. That's how Falling Down starts. These are weird little things that when you watch this movie, you have this overwhelming sense of the people moving on to other movies that you also love. The Pulp Fiction thing. I also thought like Judge Reinhold is dressed in the one outfit, and I also thought about Head Office, which is a very bad 85 comedy film that has a lot of good people in it and is still terrible in every conceivable way. And he's that guy. He's that character going to college, and then he goes right into the corporate world, and he jumps up the corporate world because his dad's a senator. It's just a really bad movie. But it is, oh, wait, this is good. This is really good. Hold on. Brandon has a couple things. Do you gentlemen feel like Hollywood ever did anything better than Coming of Teen, a comedy realm from the 90s till now? American Pie had success, but in my opinion, it is on Fast Times and others on that list status. I would agree with that statement.
I would say Mean Girls.
Mean Girls is close. Clueless as well.
Yeah.
Clueless, and actually a couple of the teen like, how about this one, Rich? I might change my Mount Rushmore. How about 10 Things I Hate About You?
I would give you that. I only very recently saw it about 2 years ago. We did an anniversary review on it on my other podcast with Natasha Bogutsky called the Big Picture Podcast, and we took a long, hard look at 10 Things I Hate About You because she loves that movie. I was only familiar with it to the fact that Letters to Cleo has done some music for it, and I love Letters to Cleo. And
but okay, so Brandon,
I was like, the only thing in it that kind of breaks the reality, becomes a little too big with the comedy, is when he does the thing with the marching band.
Yeah, well, even that is, even that is, if somebody's got enough charisma, they can pull shit like that off.
Yeah.
This is a good list Brandon's come up with. Superbad, Juno. I wouldn't say Napoleon Dynamite because I think that's a very specific, not necessarily a high school comedy. It's got high school in it, but it's more outsider. Fast Times, Heather's Breakfast Club. I think the ones I said, I like Superbad as well. Superbad's good, but Superbad, I don't know that Superbad, does Superbad have anything offensive in it?
Probably.
And that's a judgment thing. That's another thing we're looking at when we're doing this kind of legacy thing, right? Where Mean Girls, solid.
I don't think in any of these movies, these characters take as solid emotional journeys and mature as much as they do in Fast Times. I don't think.
Yeah, she goes from being a clumsy virgin to first abortion, finding a guy that actually cares about her. Ken writes, She's All That. That's another one. There were some in the 90s that kind of they gild the lily a little bit, where they actually kind of speak a certain language. And you have to talk about Clueless, because Heckerling is one of the only people aside from John Hughes that has multiple high school movies. So like she could really speak the language. Thanks, Brandon. 10 things. 10 things I hate about you. It's got a really good Julia Stiles performance. It's got a really good Heath Ledger performance.
Yes.
He's the cool guy that also ends up falling for the girl and is also part of a bigger scheme. Although I would say the only misgivings about the 90s movies, and this is a weird thing, but Mean Girls are solid. Thanks, Brendan. The 90s movies are all scheme-based. A lot of them are scheme-based and derivatives of either like 10 Things of Shakespeare. She's All That is a little bit of I can't think of what it is, but She's All That. Clueless is based on Emma. You know what I mean? So they're all a little bit derivative of other things that have come where they tie it into the 90s high schoolers, but all solid choices there. And also the legacy of this movie, let's talk about it. You have 7 or 8 actors that all go on to become stars and Academy Award nominees, Academy Award winners in some cases, and at least very high working actors. You have some that are absolutely off the charts. You have Nick Cage, who's on a bit of a Cage-assance right now. You got Forest Whitaker, who won Oscars and has been in a lot of great movies. And is working very hard on television right now. And you have Sean Penn and Jennifer Jason Leigh, who have more than hold their own with anybody we talk about. And also, you got to bring up Anthony Edwards. From a TV standpoint, he found a way to get in there and do well. And then the other big key, the legacy of this movie, you have Amy Heckerling, who goes up and makes 2 more really good high school movies and is a very well-rounded director. A bunch of different things she's made. And Cameron Crowe has become one of the singular best filmmakers we've had. He hasn't had a lot recently, but if you look at something like Almost Famous, you look at he has some bombs as well, but Almost Famous, Vanilla Sky. He's made a bunch of really great movies, and it all starts with Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It all starts with him going back to this high school and writing this book, and then all of a sudden, the legacy is in the people. So sometimes the legacy is in the property, and sometimes the legacy is in the people. And this is the rare instance where the people that are in this movie transcend everything else.
At least the positive legacy. I mean, there's a bunch of really bad wannabe raunchy teen comedies that are in our future at this standpoint in 1982, based on Porky's and then the success of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The problem is with everybody was kind of going for the raunchy stuff and missed the heart and the attention to detail, the carefully observed characters of Fast Times, and nothing that comes after this nothing is as good as this. And when I say nothing as good as this, I'm going to include the 1986 very short-lived Fast Times TV series.
Bad.
Yes.
Bad news.
It took them 4 years to kind of come together to try to take Fast Times at Ridgemont High and create it as a TV series. Now, we've seen like MASH goes from a movie to a TV series. Very successful. So it can be done. But for every MASH, there's probably about 15 Fast Times. Now, it only aired 7 episodes between March and April of 1986. Hell, even the Animal House remake called Delta House ran a full 13 episodes. Now, Amy Heckerling did come in and directed 3 of those 7 episodes. She co-wrote those episodes as well. 2 episodes were directed by Neil Israel, who was a co-writer and director of Bachelor Party. And he also wrote Look Who's Talking 2, which was directed by Amy Heckerling. So you can see kind of like where that kind of connects. And of course, Bachelor Party starring our friend Tom Hanks, who was almost in Fast Times.
Yeah. The people that missed out are like the Jodie Foster as Stacy would have been. I don't know that I would have. I don't know that I.
I don't think she would have been sweet.
She wouldn't have been as innocent. Like Foster was always way more serious than whatever she was in. Even when she was in Taxi Driver. I think the other thing you're going to get, you also are going to get legacy wise. You're going to get a series of 80s shows that try to copy the high school stuff and try to do serious themes. Facts of Life, Square Pegs.
Yeah, you had Square Pegs, which is really a great series, which only ran 1 season, created by Ann Beats, who was one of the original writers on Saturday Night Live. But Square Pegs can't really be considered Fast Times influenced because it premiered on CBS 6 weeks after Fast Times opened up in theaters. So it was, it was kind of like a zeitgeist, let's do something about kids in high school thing happening, maybe.
Well, it can be a reference. It can be a reference if they know they're making this movie that everybody's talking about, this book everybody's talking about. Hollywood finds a wonderful way to do Dante's Peak and Volcano in the same 6-month span. And Rich, you know that becomes like a feeding frenzy. We're like, we need to make it. We need to make something.
Yeah, and I think Square Pegs very much touches on that awkwardness. You have 2 main female characters who are best friends, who are trying to navigate high school, and this kind of this Square Pegs kind of centered in on like cliques and social currency and things like that in a very funny way, often at times. Whereas by the time they actually tried to do this as a TV show, as Fast Times, they had to water it down. They had to take out all the discussion about teenage sexual politics, basically. And it just was a regular old stupid sitcom. But, I mean, you had Claudia Wells, who went on to be in Back to the Future, and Courtney Thorne-Smith as the 2 leads for Fast Times. You also had Patrick Dempsey in it. You had Wallace Langham, who was in Larry Sanders Show for the first couple seasons there. And I think I might have just lost JW again because I seem to be the only one here. Not sure what happened there, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on just a second while I try to sort that out. Okay. Hold on. Oh, he had the power go out at his place. He just messaged me here. Okay. Alrighty. So that's funny because I think he has the controls on starting and stopping. So I don't know how this is going to work because he's the one who runs the show. He does all the production stuff on the high. But let's take a look through some of the comments while we're waiting for him to pop back in. Let's see. Brandon said that is it true that The Wildlife was a flop sequel to Fast Times with Chris Penn, Leah Thompson, and Rick Moranis? I don't believe so. I've never seen The Wildlife. I vaguely have it in my awareness, but I've never actually gotten to see it, which is unusual because, you know, Leah Thompson and Rick Moranis are two people who would definitely be there, you know, be on my list of people I want to see in things. And I've seen most of their overall oeuvres, if you will. So hopefully, Ken McKinnon says Judge Reinhold, awesome in the Beverly Hills Cops movies. And not gonna lie, I agree. He's a lot of fun. And at one point when they were developing a Beverly Hills Cop 4, I read one of the early scripts that they did, and the thing that brings Axel Foley back to Beverly Hills is Billy has become the mayor of Beverly Hills, and he gets murdered. He gets tossed out a window, out of like a 4th floor window, and that's what causes Axel Foley to come back to investigate the murder of his friend. And I hated that, honestly. If they made that movie, I would have expected fans to have rioted, ripped up theater seats, and burned down movie theaters. And I would have been right there in there with them, you know, throwing matches around myself. You know, that character is wonderful. And, you know, what they tried to do in that Beverly Hills Cop 4 thing was ridiculous. Hey, JW.
Hey,
everything
how you doing? Welcome to Rolling Blackouts in Florida. All right.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Okay, just kind of going through the comments here really quick. Ken also wants to shout out for Head of the Class, a really good TV show about high school.
Yeah, Head of the Class is also, I would say it's also in the thing. They did try to reboot it. They only got one season out of it. It didn't have the Howard Hessman magic.
No.
But I think that's the legacy of the movie, though. The legacy of the movie is that from this moment on, kids will be written a little bit more. The right things will be written a little bit more realistic.
And it's set a very high bar for everybody who has followed. Everybody for a really long time into the future is still going to be judged by Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Joe says he needs to have the app on his phone. I do. I do, but I was also concerned because we have 2 small kids in the house, so I have to make sure that we're in the dark for a second, and then it came back up. Thank you, Joe. Yes, sir, Captain, my captain. Also, that's another, like, we probably don't get Dead Poets Society taking people so seriously. You know what I mean? Taking specifically taking a social moray issue of abortion, suicide. That's part of it, right? And Dead Poets Society might be in the talk for best high school movies. That is a very specific brand of high school movie, though. I would say it's a headmaster kind of school. You know what I mean? Like it's an elite school kind of movie. School Ties. You know what I mean? So there are movies out there that are different, though, but have similar veins running through them with the seriousness and being able to get into the mind and heart and soul of a teenager. Also, most of it, Hollywood is fake. They do fake ass, like just trying to get money and trying to do whatever junk they throw out there to get a PG-13 rating, you know?
Well, let me ask you this again. Because, you know, we've mentioned the abortion a couple of times. And I still love when Brad, the best example of familial love between siblings and just acceptance is she lies to Brad to get him to take her to the bowling alley. He sees her going across the street to the abortion clinic. He picks her up and he just looks at her and is like, bowling or whatever he says. There's no judgment. He's more goofing on her for the shitty lie that she told him than anything else.
And he has a wonderful moment where he says to her, "Who did it? You're not going to tell me." And he's like, "Are you hungry?" Like it immediately goes to, "I need to take care of her." He's a good big brother.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's a great warm moment. And if anything in this film is going to fall into that category that we hate of they can't make this movie now because of blank, it's the casual acceptance of abortion. I think studios would balk at that because they would feel they would lose audience in certain states in this country. I can actually see you saying we have to talk about abortion.
It's very specific, right? Yeah. Like I think it scares Hollywood. Like part of the way it works in this movie is it's nonchalant. It becomes a decision she makes out of necessity, and she also makes it, you know, because she has a guy on the other end going, well, "We got to do something. We got to get rid of it." Like,
yeah.
So he has his immediate reaction. Everything he does after he finds out she's pregnant is the opposite of what you should do. And the thing about it that's interesting is you're right. I think it would get typecast into an abortion movie, which isn't really fair because life kind of happens around us.
Yeah, it's what 5% of this entire movie, maybe, of its runtime. But yeah, people would like zero in on that.
Joe, I know you didn't mean it like that, Joe. I know. It's okay. Everything's fine. But so it is a seminal high school teen comedy. It is also probably one of the best teenager movies ever made. Amy Heckerling, Cameron Crowe, all these people come together to make one of the greatest movies. And if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, I urge you to go out and rewatch it. It holds up remarkably well. And the plot string thing, even though that, you know, some critics had a problem with it, I think the interesting thing is it's like the camera is the person for me. Because it drifts in and out of the plot points, and I don't even think about them. And you just watch what's happening to wherever the camera is at that day. So I always viewed it as like kind of an unseen author kind of thing, but I can understand where people might be a little bit hesitant. So now is the portion of our show where we talk about us.
I was going to wrap this up by saying, if you want to see this movie, it is available on Amazon Video.
Criterion
on
Amazon right now.
Great Blu-ray of it. It's not available on the Criterion channel, unfortunately, but the Criterion Blu-ray has a lot of great special features. And if you're actually kind of morbidly curious about checking out Fast Times, the very short-lived TV series, there's 2 episodes of it up on YouTube, and I watched one of them earlier. It's not good, but what's amazing is the opening montage to establish they're at the mall. The shots are from the opening montage of the mall from the movie. Yeah, so they're using
a fantastic montage.
5 years old.
It's a fantastic 80s montage, so they should, like, when you see a movie like this,
but they're using a Whitney Houston song with it. I think it's like "How Will I Know," and I'm like, ugh, really? It just didn't feel right.
It's not the Go-Go's. That's not the beat.
No.
Anyway, I don't know.
Go-Go's opening with the movie opening with "We Got the Beat," just the Universal logo and da 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 da. You know that? Oh God, that gives
and also such the ending.
This is a movie about youth and energy and excitement. And God, that's the perfect way to start this movie.
Oh, it's a great movie. It ends in an arcade where everybody's playing games and everybody's looking at everybody's ass. It's amazing, incredible. It's like a it's. And I would say to people our age, if you have kids that are teenagers, it's got some smut that you have to get over. Like it's got some nudity issues, right? But it is a movie where you can maybe find common ground and talk about like how's your high school? Was your high school like this? A little bit different, and maybe get a little bit of a talk in there. Now, this is the portion of the show we love the best. Well, next week is always good, but talking about ourselves is always super important, Rich. Where can people find you?
I can be found at FilmBuffOnline.com with all my reviews, other writings, some of the work of my friends like Bill Gadavaskis. who is a great comic book historian. He recently wrote about the whole kerfluffle with Warner Brothers and their DC films. I'm probably going to continue to write about some of that going on, as well as some other things.
You mean how we got rid of Batgirl because she was bringing the DC brand down, but we have Ezra Miller.
We're keeping Ezra Miller around.
Stealing liquor like he's in the 1920s, Connecticut, Vermont. Jesus. Where else? I'm sorry. I cut you off.
Also, you can just find me shooting my mouth off about movies and other stuff on Twitter, like everybody else, at FilmBuffRich.
So I'm on Twitter at JWPA Movie Guy. I'm on the Instagram and the and Facebook. You can also find us plenty of places with the Movie Guy is my new thing. And you know, we have another podcast I do with my good friend Paul Spratt called Loud and Nerdy on Wednesday nights. That's before this. We didn't have a show tonight. We had some technical stuff going on, but it's always a good time. And you know, Brandon's got a comment, and then we go right to the preview. Just read The Wildlife was seen as a spiritual sequel in the '84 to Fast Times, starring Stotlz, Leah Thompson, Rick Moranis, Cameron Crowe, Chris Penn, but it flopped, so it was never claimed as attached. Yeah, you know what? Wildlife is one of those weird movies where it has some sequences that work, but most of the script doesn't work. And I think they greenlit it because they wanted the success of Fast Times. And that '84, when it's released, The Wildlife, is right in the wheelhouse where Fast Times is picking up VHS and picking up rentals and picking up people buying it and people finding it and having parties watching it. And, you know, so they wanted to cash in on it. It's not a particularly good film, to be honest.
Yeah. When you call something a spiritual sequel, you're trying to cash in on the vibe of the original without actually having any like story or, you know, continuity elements there. Again, I think somebody brought that up earlier while you were blacked out there, JW. And like I said, Leah Thompson and Rick Moranis, you know, I really would need to check that out, even if it is not that great, just so because that's a gap there in my thing. And next week,
boom,
the movie you couldn't escape if you had cable in the 1980s.
Well, also on Amazon right now. So if you want to get ahead of us and rewatch it, we're going to do The Beastmaster next week. It is an HBO classic in the sense that it was on HBO every Saturday morning. And if you're a kid, you watched it a lot. It has a Black Panther. It has the cutest can be of what is Ricky Tikki-Tavi? What the mole, not moles. No.
Yeah.
What the hell are they called?
Muskrats? No.
Ricky Tikki-Tavi. What is it? Hold on.
I'm flaking on this.
I can't believe
I've technically been podcasting for somebody or other for the last 4.5 hours.
Welcome to my every Wednesday, Rich.
I know.
Yeah, it's hard to do. It's not easy at all. What is Ricky Tikki-Tavi? Hold on. He's a mongoose.
Mongoose. That's
mongoose. If you had mongoose in the pool, awesome. But basically, it's this wonderful movie where you have a lot of stuff, and you basically are just. It's a crazy movie. It's got Rip Torn. It's got very horrific elements and also super cool elements. It's got the wonderful Mark Singer in one of his only superstarring roles. He would later go on and star in a really great miniseries from the 80s called V and V: The Final Battle, which are two of the greatest sci-fi. He's a sci-fi legend. But Beastmaster is where it all began, and Beastmaster is an 82 movie celebrating its 40 years on the planet. And so many of us saw it on Saturday mornings. It is great. It is fun. It's on Amazon to watch for free because I watched it like 2 weeks ago, prepping for my summer of 82. And you're right. You can't go wrong with Tanya Roberts. Now, we talked about respecting women. No, not in Beastmaster. That's not going to happen. It's a sword and sorcery movie. So we're going to see a lot of skin. There's a lot. Actually, for a PG-rated movie, there's a ton of skin. It's a ton. And this is the answer to MGM trying to answer Universal and trying to get their own little Conan movie off the ground. Can't go wrong with Tanya Roberts. That's what Ken says. Brandon says, Mr. Phantasm himself, Don Coscarelli, a classic with the great Marcus Shank. Yeah, it's a great movie. It's not, I don't know if it's good, but it is great. Does that make sense? We'll talk about it next week. But thank you for joining us on a Wednesday. We appreciate all you do, and we appreciate you turning in every week. Beastmaster can watch on Amazon, see it early, and then come watch it and talk about it next week with us. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday. Loud Generation movie. So excited.